with demand expected to come back, the question remains, does this mean the economy is back on track?
Companies now, after experimenting with offshore in places like India, Philippines, and Poland, want to bring those jobs back.
We invest in the U.S. We're the biggest exporter in the country. In the cycle we're in right now, we're creating jobs.
From Radio America, it's Neil Asbury's Made in America, the show that explores American industry, large and small, and promotes American-made products everywhere. Put Neil Asbury's Made in America to work for you.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. So, Rich, this just in, you know how just a short while ago we're talking about a recession and we're going to have a recession and everywhere was a recession.
Everyone's studying bond inversions.
The
Amazing.
3 R's, right? Recession,
Amazing.
recession.
Yeah, exactly.
But get this, shoppers are expected to spend $1.1 trillion, that's with a T, at U.S. retailers this holiday season. And last year it was just about $1 trillion, just a little bit over. Mm-hmm. You know, so that's a very, very nice, healthy increase. Mm-hmm. So, it looks like the consumer confidence is quite high. It's actually about a 5% increase over what it was last year, and that's big. I mean, inflation, what is it, about 1.5%? So people are spending much greater than the rate of inflation. So that means we're growing.
Yes. Could that mean that they actually have a tad more money to spend, that they're feeling comfortable, they're secure, they have a better job perhaps than they did before in the last 8 years or 9 years or 10 years? Also, Neil, the stats came out this week that the construction of new homes, the number hit this week is higher than it's been in 12 years. And that's a big ticket item.
And also,
that's no toaster.
That's very big, and the reason is because people have jobs, right? Or more people have jobs because the U.S. unemployment rate in August held at 3.7%, which is near a 50-year low. Could you imagine? 50 years you would have to go back before unemployment was that low. So really good. And hourly wages over the last year has increased over 3%, and again, much greater than the rate of inflation.
I know. So obviously, one would think, particularly if you're going to sign a mortgage, people are feeling confident. Because I don't think you would buy a big-ticket item such as a house and cars and things like that if you didn't feel comfortable that you actually could pay for it at some point, 10 years, 5 years, 3 years, no less than a year out.
But here's another statistic, and talking about our young people. And, Rich, we've all often talked about the skills gap. About the new economy, and we're creating all kinds of opportunities here. I'm an American entrepreneur. I own 5 manufacturing facilities, and it's very, very hard to find the people to run the technology. I mean, manufacturing today isn't these old big fly presses, and you got these big presses coming down, and they're dirty, and all this oil is leaking all over the place, and they're dangerous, and you're going to cut your fingers off if you're not watching. I mean, the equipment today is just absolutely amazing. Lots of technology. But, there's so many great jobs in our economy. We're just not training our young people. And believe it or not, this is a statistic. We're going to talk with our next guest here just in a second. There was 3 million students that graduated with higher degrees, graduated college. 67% of them did not have a job lined up in the field that they studied.
Yeah, that's extremely possible.
So that means like 2 million out of 3 million didn't have a job lined up, right? I mean, it's amazing. Mm-hmm. I mean, I remember I graduated school and immediately, boom, I was right in the workforce and working, and off we go, and I haven't looked back since. We're very pleased to have with us, Rich, joining us, Jennifer Kushel, and she's the founder of Exploring Your Potential, and she's going to talk to us about this skills gap and what's going on and what we can do about it. Jennifer, welcome to Made in America.
Thank you, Neil. Great to be here with you and Rich.
So amazing that, and we've talked about this, and we didn't quite have your statistic, but it's glaring. Yeah. Our education system, is a lot of people from around the world, kids from around the world come here to America to get advanced degrees. But the fact is, many of our kids are going to school, they're graduating, they're spending all this money, getting into all this debt, and they're not finding jobs. I mean, how could that be?
it's a big problem, and it's a problem everywhere in all different schools, all different communities. I think our educational system is really struggling to educate young people around what the workforce, not only of today but the future, looks like and how that's going to be fueled. There's a lot of focus on making sure that they have the right competencies, that they have the soft skills, they can speak and present properly. But I think we're still really missing out on helping them understand how industries function, how they can map their interests to actual work in the economy. And that means not just jobs, but entrepreneurial opportunities, social impact opportunities. There's so many different ways to engage in the workforce today, but that conversation seems to be missing.
Well, it seems very intriguing to me that if everything, and particularly technology, since we're such a world oriented towards technology, changes fast, often very dramatically. Why doesn't the educational system keep up with that? Why doesn't the educational system change along with all this massive change and the shifts in the paradigm that we see all the time, every year, maybe every 6 months in technology? It would seem obvious to me that education should be changing and keeping up with it.
It is obvious, but you can still meet a lot of educators these days who say it's not their job to prepare young people for the workforce. It's their job to educate them for life and to teach them how to think. So there's some fundamentals that have to change when it comes to looking at the ROI on education. And is that the best investment? I still think it's an outstanding investment of your time to have a college education if you can. But I think we have to train our young people to be a lot more strategic with where they're going to school, what they're studying, and really how to align what they're interested in with the work that they do, instead of treating them like sheep and instead of beating them down so much that they lose that inspiration, they lose that excitement about what the world looks like. There's so much opportunity out there, and I think the world's a real candy store for them if they look at it from that perspective and are open to exploring.
So, Jennifer, we just talked a moment ago about unemployment rate, 50-year low. And then, it sounds counterintuitive, but we have all these college kids spending all this money and getting into the workforce and not finding jobs. So obviously, there's a lot of jobs being created. And people like me are always complaining that we have more jobs open than we can fill. And quality of the candidates, it's just not there if they're available and not working. And everybody that's halfway good has got a job and doing well and making good money. So what is your advice to the young people today about, what should they be thinking about? What sort of careers, how should they be preparing themselves for the economy that exists today?
I think it's really important that they find business models that work for them. Not everyone's cut out to have a regular job. Not everyone's cut out to be an entrepreneur. Also, I think we tend to all live in a bubble. Whether that's a small one or a big one, we only know what we've been exposed to. And it's hard for all of us to continuously challenge our comfort zone and push beyond that. And that's where we see a lot of opportunity often. So when we're only exposed to a small amount of input, we don't see what else is beyond. And that's why I really think it's important for young people to really connect with industries that are interesting to them, but go out and read, go out and visit them, get on a plane and go travel somewhere and see where people are gathering and talking about these things. Connect with people that you haven't connected with before and get their perspectives. Doors can open up for us all on a day-to-day basis if we push ourselves to go a little bit further. And we're really missing a mapping of what the world of work looks like for young people. That's something we've been really trying to do with introducing Exploring Your Potential into the schools, because it helps them with a framework of understanding what work is and how it functions. And what's the difference between being talent and labor? What's the difference between your economic potential if you have a high school degree or a college degree or you don't? What is the impact of having a broader network of people? How does it change when you position what you want to do in a really thoughtful way online and in your meetings with people? So I think there's a lot of fundamentals we just are not teaching typically that we're trying to change.
It's very often people that understand where their talents really are and where their strengths are and how to capitalize on them. And evidently the program that you have, Exploring Your Potential, really gives folks, from what we've read, 75%, improvement in confidence. Confidence is very important. in what you're doing and believing in yourself. But wouldn't it be great if you really understood your strengths and say, oh, my God, I can do it. Not only can I do this, I'm good at it. And to me, it would really inure great benefit to those going through your program.
Opening up the way that they see the world and the way that they see opportunity, and really building confidence and clarity and focus. Those are huge outcomes that we're seeing, and I think it's really important that we build self-efficacy, the sense of potential for them personally. I think that's what definitely motivates people to go in very positive directions versus negative ones. And I mean, we've seen a lot of young people being very distraught and stressed and overwhelmed with the positions that they're in right now. And if we can ignite them with excitement about the world and what they can accomplish and how they can make an impact themselves, I think we start to see dramatic shifts with them quickly.
And the other thing I'd like to see, Jennifer, is a big investment in vocational training in the trades. Another big failure, I believe, in our educational system, and something that can be fixed. I mean, we just got to focus on it. I mean, we can fix it if we want to. Hey, thanks for being on the show.
I'm glad you brought that up. That's right.
Yeah, I mean, let's get you back and talk about that, because that's also very important to people like me. And these are really good jobs, and we're just not training our people in it. But anyway, Jennifer, thanks for being on the show. Unfortunately, we're out of time. We got to take a break. Jennifer Kushel, she's the founder of Exploring Your Potential, and she'll be back again with us soon. Don't leave us, because Dr. Rich and I got a lot more to talk about what's going on in our world and your jobs.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Ruffin. So, Rich, I was very, very kind of surprised, I guess you would say, to see that GM goes on strike.
That's right.
Actually goes on strike. We haven't seen a strike like this for a while in the auto industry.
Well, I find it remarkable that the UAW is going against GM after the UAW stole the equity from the bondholders, violating SEC law, and then they turn around and they strike against their own company. It's kind of weird.
Yeah. But hey, let's not forget that unions are very, very powerful, and American auto manufacturers are just gasping for life, right? The European and Asian auto manufacturers who's in the United States are in southern states, right-to-work states, kicking butt, doing incredibly well in this country, employing tens of thousands of American workers, making cars here in the United States, exporting them back to Japan, back to Europe, back to China. Meaning, we can make great cars in this country, and we can be very competitive. The American worker is very, very competitive. But when you have this decades and decades and decades of unions and the demands, and it's been just like an anchor around the neck of these companies. They just can't survive. And then it took how many billions of dollars of American tax money to make sure that GM did not go under, that Chrysler did not go under. Now, Ford, to their credit, did not take any bailout money.
Right, because they had a
survive.
Huge credit line with banks. They were banks.
They were able to survive.
Yep.
But it's really sad to see this industry that was founded in the United States, that everyone in the world came to and marveled in Detroit, one of the greatest cities of the world, one of the richest cities of the world,
one of the richest,
the greatest artist collection,
class cities in the United States and in the world.
One of the greatest zoos, and now they had to sell all their animals because they can't afford to pay the pensions of all their government employees. That, again, was a result of unions running amok.
They sold artwork from their museums, too.
Right, they couldn't afford it.
It's unbelievable.
Right? This great American city that was brought to its knees.
I got a better thing. Let me throw this out while you're discussing that and some of the follies of Detroit. What about the fact that GM still owes the U.S. government almost $10 billion of the stimulus money they got? It's still out there. It's just percolating out there. I was listening to Kudlow the other day, Larry Kudlow, and he was discussing that. They still owe the U.S. government, us taxpayers, all this money. So I'm like stunned that Obama backed the union, he'd be forced the CEO of one of the largest corporations in the United States to leave. Richard Wagner, he's gone out of the place. And he brings in the union folks, and he puts his, Ratner was the guy who became the car czar, who, by the way, never did anything with cars. But hey, what does that matter? In the Obama administration, you got to have your cronies there. You got to watch out for your money.
Well,
make sure your buddies get it. So isn't that astounding to you? And then you're right. You look at the right-to-work states, and they're just tooling along, doing their thing, making great products. And you know what? They're as proud of their products in South Carolina and Tennessee as they are, perhaps, in Detroit.
Yeah. Well, maybe more so. Maybe more so.
I think more so. I do think more so.
Hey, look, the Fed actually lowered interest rates.
Good, bad, and the ugly.
Yeah, no, but truly, this is a very unusual situation where you have a president who's out there,
I love it.
Like in the media, just berating this guy. I mean, just absolutely.
Yeah, I don't think he likes Powell very much, does he? They don't. Well, you know what? I bet they get along great and they go into a room together.
But here it is that the poor guy goes and lowers interest rates
a quarter point.
Well, 25 basis points is big. I mean, that's huge. That's big in this world. But yet Trump continued to let him have it. I mean, it's absolutely.
Once again, he continues to fail.
You don't want to take yes for an answer or what?
He's failing. Unbelievable. He's failing. But you know what, Neil? They were expecting. They wanted 50 basis points. They wanted.
But that
they
would
wanted
be,
that. That's what they thought they were going to get.
Yeah, but that's historic. And at the same time, I don't know if I agree with all of this. I mean, there needs to be some sort of separation and some sort of decorum. And it's not like this is the president's piggy bank and like he's the one who's
I agree with that.
The gatekeeper here on what should happen. I mean, economists and people and people who are not being threatened politically should be sitting around saying what's right for the country outside of this sort of
boy, it's a good thing we don't threaten people politically. Let me think. Kavanaugh this week, we can discuss that some other time. But wait a minute, I want to get back to this point. I think what you're saying is very, very correct. Although I don't think it's against the president, who allegedly, and I think he does, stand up for the average American. So he's America first. But I think Powell, and I think the Feds really need to look at what the other central banks are doing, Neil, and how we're competing with the value of the U.S. dollar versus the Deutsche Mark or anything else that's out there. And a lot of the other international banks have lowered, lowering dramatically.
Did you say Deutsche Mark?
Yeah, Deutsche Mark.
The euro, man. Yeah, you got to get up with the times here.
I'm thinking Merkel. I'm thinking Merkel. I'm thinking Germany.
You remind me of Biden right now with the record player.
I'm thinking Germany. That's what I'm thinking. But the point is exactly that.
The point is
you've got to compete on that level.
Yeah.
That's where they're looking at, right? That's where Kudlow and others and Mnuchin are looking at. How do we remain competitive in the world right now with when our interest rates are higher than anybody else in the world? That's a problem.
Yeah.
That's where he's coming from.
Well, I'm going to go and count my French francs right now. Had to get that in there. Hey, Rich, we got a great guest coming on. We're going to change gears a little bit. We got Steve Milloy, who's the publisher of junkscience.com, and he's going to talk about all these dire predictions.
Sharply higher at the open, stocks continued to perform well over the course of the day Tuesday.
And I think that bodes well here over the next couple of years for having bigger demands coming to this country.
Now, more of Neil Asbury's Made in America.
A very big welcome to you today. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Ruffman. So, Rich, we're going to change gears a little bit here.
We're going to get off of Deutsche Marks.
And French francs.
So I had to say it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But there still is the British pound.
I know that. There's your exception.
There you go.
Yeah. All right. I'll accept that.
Okay, but we're going to go to another topic that's also very, very important, and that's climate change. I mean, the Green New Deal, and let me tell you, I mean, it looks like Democrats are really making, climate change as the core issue of our day.
Do they have anything else?
Well, they can't really say the economy.
Can't do that.
Yeah, they can't really run on that one. Well, all the free stuff, the usual.
Well, there is
usual.
trillions of freebies. They can do that.
Yeah.
I get that.
And of course,
that's a goodie.
We got climate change. But hey, look, it's an emotional issue. I get it. The world is changing, and it has always been changing. I mean, we've gone through periods of cooling and heating, and we wouldn't be here as humans.
No. Really,
if there wasn't global warming, what thawed out the ice age?
Those were seasons. I remember that because
you remember that
it would get cold in New York in February. It's kind of lousy, and it would be dark by 4:30 in the afternoon. And then I don't know, sometime around April, it got to be 60, and everyone came out of their homes and went, "Good Lord, it's spring." And then then we get really hot, and now it's cold summer, and then it comes to fall, and then winter again. I don't know.
And then came the daffodils.
And then the flowers did come up. All right. Yeah, I got it. It was seasons. Sure.
But let's talk about some of these predictions, and should I say dire predictions. Right now we got joining us Steve Milloy, who's the publisher of JunkScience.com. Steve, welcome to Made in America.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me.
So it is true. I mean, if you go back, many, many years ago, there has been a lot of dire predictions. And, some of them, Florida's going to disappear and we're going to have famine and, life as we know it and the whole human race. But this isn't new, right? I mean, it's been around a while. In fact, there's been even reports in the New York Times 30, 40 years ago saying that we're going through a period of global cooling. So how can we go from cooling to warming? So
cover story on Time magazine
in a couple of decades. I mean, this takes millions of years to kind of switch gears. But Steve, tell us what's going on.
Well, these days you can't turn on the TV or surf the internet or listen to the radio without hearing about some dire forecast of planetary doom from Al Gore or Greta Thunberg or some Democrat on the Hill or the presidential candidates. The world is going to end. AOC famously said the world is going to end in 12 years. I guess now it's like 11 and a half. And, it's really, I've been working on environmental issues for about 30 years. And one thing I found is that very few people understand anything about the environment. Everybody says they care for it, they want to save it, but they know precious little about it, and they're not really interested in learning. So what do you do with all these scares that are coming up? So Myron Ebell from Competitive Enterprise Institute and I put together this compilation of scares going back 50 years, and we probably could have gone back a little further, and started with Rachel Carson and DDT, but we really just started to try to keep it on climate because that's what we hear about all the time. And so, it was like shooting fish in a barrel because there's just these crazy headlines. I mean, you mentioned one. In the late 70s, the New York Times said that there was no end. This is in the 70s. They were worried about the next ice age, and so there was this New York Times headline about how there's no end in sight to the ongoing cooling trend. And they said it was going to go on for 30 or 40 years. Well, here we are, 30, 40 years later, and now it's global warming. So regardless of what's happening, environmentalists are always wrong.
Well, you're right, and then you have all these unintended consequences. What I find intriguing in this is the religiosities. I have to borrow that from Mara.
Yeah, there's no question about
the religiosity of this whole scenario. Either you believe this, or you're a sinner. I mean, we don't even want to talk to you. We're going to destroy you. So this is really way. I mean, this is almost as well. I guess it's more crazy than Rachel Carson. I'm glad you brought it up because I do remember that when I was in college, everybody had to read Silent Spring, and then we found out that the whole thing was a farce anyway. And then the unintended consequences of Silent Spring is that millions of people died as a result of not having DDT because they couldn't kill the animals, the bugs, and so forth. They're all getting sick. We have all sorts of problems around the world. So imagine if we went along with everything that the folks in this religion called climate change was, foisting upon us. Good Lord. Imagine the unintended consequences of that.
No, that's absolutely right. Rachel Carson and the early EPA are responsible for the deaths of untold tens of millions of lives in Africa when DDT was banned. And now these people they're attacking our, primary source of energy and our whole standard of living. And what do they think is going to happen? Or what does anybody think is going to happen? And, around the world there are, there's 300 million people that don't have electricity just in India. And how are these people going to get electricity if we just make it so expensive they can't have it? And so, of course, the developing world is not going along with any of this climate nonsense. It's really just people in the U.S. and Western Europe who, have some sort of rich person's guilt. And, it's just we've got to fight against it. And, fortunately, we have President Trump in the White House, who's a tremendous ally. And so I think, tide's turning.
Well, here an interesting thing is, and I'm intrigued with this, Steve, is that we hear people in this country complaining about us. They're looking in. I want to know, why aren't they complaining about China? Why aren't they protesting right now in front of the Chinese embassy? Stop those coal-fired electric plants. All right. How about in India, as you just pointed out? What about it? Why are they not doing that? But I hear right now, I better stop using straws. I better stop eating meat. Oh, my God, Americans are so awful.
Well, absolutely. If environmentalists really cared about the environment, you're absolutely right. They would go to China. Most of the sulfur dioxide in the air over the United States doesn't come from the United States. It comes from China.
Exactly.
Right? We have to give up our plastic straws because 80% of the ocean waste comes out of two rivers in Asia and Africa, something like that. The straw that I use in Washington, D.C. is not going to wind up in some sea turtle's nose. It's just not. But, it's not about the environment. It's not about saving the planet. It's about political power. That's all this is about.
Hey, Steve,
I call them everything from climate bedwetters to climate communists. And when it comes to the power, these people are trying to use climate to gain political power.
Hey, Steve, we're going to have to take a quick break. We're talking with Steve Milloy, publisher of JunkScience.com. Still a lot more to talk about. You don't want to miss it. Stay with us.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Ruffin, and we're talking to Steve Milloy, who's the publisher of JunkScience.com. Hey, Steve, Rich just made a very, very good comment about, China and its dirty coal and, the 1950s technology and, to electrify the country, they built these antiquated coal plants. And, it's creating all sorts of pollution. Not very nice. However, here in the United States, we have this technology called clean coal. It's not the dirty coal of the 1950s. Coal technology has greatly improved to where in our country, coal is not a dirty fuel. And what is it, like 70% of our electricity in our country comes from coal-powered plants? Wouldn't it be so much better if we allowed our clean coal technology to be perfected, to invest in it, and then to export that to places like China and India? And wouldn't that do more for climate change than any other thing that we could do in the next few years, the next 10 years? Yes, let's get to renewables, but that's going to be a while. And let's set up some period of time that we take advantage of all this great technology that we have, like in clean coal, and let the real polluters of the world have access to that. Isn't that at least part of the solution?
Well, I think you're kind of on the right track. I mean, first, I don't mean to correct you, but U.S. electricity, about 30% is coal, and it's been on a decline for a while because of all this cheap natural gas. In China, their coal plants are actually newer and cleaner than ours in terms of everything. China's problem is that most people that live in these cities, they have these huge cities, they're still burning coal at home and in residential buildings for heat and for cooking. And so China, the reason Chinese air is so dirty is because they burn wood and they burn coal during the wintertime at home. And of course, that's not scrubbed, that's not very efficient, so the air is terrible. If they were on coal plants, their air would actually be fine because they burn coal cleanly over there. Coal, this is a huge myth. Coal is a clean fuel. Coal has not fouled the air anywhere. I know that the Obama EPA made a big deal, tried to say that, coal kills millions of people around the world. It's all total nonsense. Coal is clean. Natural gas is clean. There's really no problem with fossil fuels. I think CO2 emissions are good. It's plant food. NASA satellite photos show that the Earth has never been greener than it is today because of all the CO2 we put in the atmosphere. There's nothing that we're going to do to change the weather or the climate by whatever energy we use. If you want to switch, I don't know why people are so bent on switching out of fossil fuels. But new technologies may come along at some point. I mean, we have nuclear, but the environmentalists have opposed that for 40 years now. And why would they oppose it? Because it's CO2 emission free, but yet they do. The rest of the stuff is really just expensive, and it's not really accomplishing anything except raising electricity prices.
So, Steve, that raises another question. So, if in fact, and let's think about that into the content of the the Green New Deal, then if it's not really what you just said, which is right, I think you're correct. Then maybe it's strictly political. And it's a socioeconomic revolution that has nothing to do with the climate. See, I don't think any of this has to do with climate. I think this has to do with wealth redistribution, amalgamation of power, and a political change that's radical as can be. That's what I think all this is really about. Look at the new Green Deal. Or the Green New Deal, rather. I always invert that. The Green New Deal. Look at how much of that really has to do with the politics of what we're doing and how you can do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, you can't do this, all across the board. All these different verticals that you can't do. Does that really have to do with the climate? No, it really doesn't have to do with the climate. It has to do with, well, of course, we have to give money over to these people, and we have to do that with that, and you can't have this type. I mean, do you remember the fact that a few years ago they said, well, you really can't have water in your toilet. You have to really restrict. I remember, you have to flush 88 times to get rid of the effluent. I mean, you just have to do that. So we're going to wind up, or you have a shower. Well, we have to retard the water coming down in the shower. So you take a 2-hour shower because you can't get soap off your back. You're like, wait a minute, I can't get there. I don't know what's going on. So I can't flush. I can't take a shower. Oh my God, how do I brush my teeth? You know what I mean? Seriously, my feeling is this, and I'm very passionate about it. This is nothing to do with climate. They don't care about the climate. It is more about the consolidation of power. To me, that's what this is all about.
Yeah, really? I wrote a book about 10 years ago.
You get my point?
What?
All right, I'm going to stand up, Neil, next time I'm saying that.
I wrote a book about 10 years ago called Green Hell, How Environmentalists Plan to Control Your Life, when Obama became president. That's what it was all about, how with the toilets and the showers and the cars, they want to tell you where to live, how many children you can have, where to work, what kind of food you can eat. I mean, they want to control all of your life. And the nature, what's behind all this? All you got to do is look at the people pushing this stuff, from AOC, to Naomi Klein and Bernie Sanders. I mean, all these communists. You've got these con men like Al Gore. You've got the solar and wind lobbies who just want the taxpayer subsidies. You even have companies like ExxonMobil. Why is Big Oil pushing global warming? Well, because Big Oil doesn't like the independent frackers. They want to put them out of business. They want to, with independent fracking, Big Oil and OPEC lost control of the pricing power of oil, and they want that back. So they want to put the frackers out of business. Everybody's got an agenda.
Hey, Steve, it's called the John D. Rockefeller syndromes. Go study the late 1800s, early 1900s, and you'll catch on to what they did 100 and some odd years ago.
Steve, unfortunately, guys, I mean, I love the conversation. We're gonna
this is great. I want him back.
Yeah, hey, come back and join us, Steve.
Anytime.
I'm sure Phil will contact you. Steve Milloy, publisher at junkscience.com. Hey, folks, stick around. Dr. Rothman and I have some final thoughts for the day.
Made in America.
Big welcome to you today. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. So, Rich, you were pretty passionate about that. I love it.
Well, I am. I'm astounded when I listen to all these people on climate change. I mean, think about that. We have trouble figuring out where the bloody hurricane was going just a week or so ago, and we're going to figure out where we're going to be 100 years from now? You got to be kidding me. 100 years from now, if we stop using straws, just want to say that, if we stop using straws, Neil, we're going to save 0.1% of a centigrade in the entire world. If everything goes right, we'll do that. Is it worth it?
Yeah. Interesting. But energy's in the news in big ways. First of all, President Trump in California is having a brawl over the efficiency of the miles per gallon that cars should have.
That's right.
Very interested to see how that plays out. But California, from a regulatory state, from a point of view, as a manufacturer, not of automobiles, but other products, it is true that California, for just about everything, has different regulations for, you name it. Well, in this particular case, the efficiency of gas mileage. But you could talk about many, many different things. If you're providing plumbing fixtures, the efficiency that you just brought about showers and toilets.
That's in California, truth. Don't you remember that?
You can't sell the same plumbing fixtures as you would in Florida and California because they have a very, very different sort of regulation.
Yeah, they use sand.
That's much more stringent, right? But manufacturers go along with it. Why? Because California, if it were a country, would be the 5th largest economy in the world, right? So California is just not a second-rate sort of a state. It's a hugely important state. In fact, if it was a country, it would be one of the most important countries in the world, California by itself. So, manufacturers cannot ignore it. So they have to go along with whatever the legislatures in Sacramento says. Hey, look, in California, you want to do business, this is what you got to do. And but it looks like President Trump is pushing back on that and said, hey, wait a second, California, you can't do that. We're gonna take that authority away from you. I think it's going to go to the courts, and you're going to find a liberal court.
Probably there now.
And they're going to say, okay, California, the president can't make you do that. And then it's going to go to another court, and who knows what's going to happen there.
Well, they're going to claim states' rights, and they're going to say the feds don't have the right to do this. But if you think about it, the different laws that they have and rules, I should say, for cars, automotive vehicles in California also affects the manufacture of petroleum products. They are calculated differently for California than they are in the rest of the country. There's a different type of calculus that they use for the gasoline that's out in California. It's not exactly the same.
Oh, you mean the formulation?
The formulation is different. They make it differently to work better in California. It's one of the reasons why gasoline in California is more expensive. It's not the same gasoline that you get on the East Coast. It's a different gasoline. But what's interesting? You said energy. Let's talk about this just for a sec, if we can, if we have time. And that is that what's been going on in the Mideast, the attack by the Iranians, right. It's alleged and pretty much concluded.
And so what is the real story?
Well, get aside from the real story. The real story, here's the real story. The real story is gasoline did not go to $10 a gallon. Now, think for a minute. If we were not energy independent, if we didn't have fracking, if we didn't have this redundancy of energy sources that we didn't have 25 years ago, not even 10 years ago, because the Obama administration was stopping it big time, what do you think gasoline would be costing right now? What sort of a panic would we be having in the United States and around the world with gasoline going up, and everything following with that? It would destroy the economy, wouldn't it? But it's not doing that now. We're not doing that now. We're in a more of a calm motif right now because we're a net energy importer. We don't exporter. We don't need the Mideast oil, do we?
Yeah, I mean that is fascinating.
That's the story.
Yeah. And, the president pointed that out. He said, look, we do not need Middle East oil. Imagine that in the 1970s, right? When you had the oil embargo, and remember that? And,
I remember that because I was online waiting for gasoline.
The odd even days you couldn't get gas, and it was very much restricted, and there was lines going
and
everywhere.
Fights at gas stations.
Oh, it was crazy. But imagine if half of the oil production in the 1970s in Saudi Arabia was just wiped out with some bombing.
It would be scary, wouldn't it?
Oh, I mean, my goodness, the world would be coming to an end.
I know that, and Jimmy, and the
but
worst
that
part
didn't happen.
And the worst part is Jimmy Carter was the president. Oh my God! Give me a break.
Well, he did say one thing this week is that there should be an age limit to being president, and he was basically saying to Biden, what the hell are you doing, man? You don't have the mental capacity. But that is another topic for another day.
Another time.
Hey, Rich, unfortunately, we are out of time.
We are.
But don't be sad, because we're going to be back again next week for another adventure of Made in America, where we never stop fighting for your jobs.